This is the Self-Taught or Not podcast with
Dylan Israel
and Eric Hanchett, where we teach you the do's and don'ts of software development from two software development professionals, one self-taught and one not.
Before we begin, I just want to let you guys know this is the last episode of Season 1. We have 24 episodes. We thought this is a good ending mark, and we will be back at the end of January, beginning of February for Season 2. Me and Dylan have already come up with a bunch of different topics and ideas we want for Season 2, and we're really excited to share it with you guys. Make sure that you, if you haven't already, go back through the back catalog. We have 24 episodes, lots of information. Make sure you check that out. And also, we'd love for you guys, if you like this podcast, share it with more people. We want to reach more people with this podcast. So share it on social media, share it on Facebook, wherever you're at. Let more people know about it. And that would be great. So let's go ahead and go in and talk about being a self-taught developer.
Today, we're going to talk about something I'm very enthusiastic about, and that's about going the self-taught path and what that really entails, how to get there, and what the journey's like and what to expect.
I always say self-taught is a pretty hard road, but there's so many great advantages to it. But what I really want to start with, Dylan, is what do you think self-taught is? Because I hear self-taught, and as a developer, I got a CS degree, of course, as the name of this podcast suggests. But I had to learn so many things outside my CS degree. Like, I had to teach myself new technologies. We didn't learn JavaScript in any deep way when I was at school, so I had to teach myself that. I had to learn source control. I had to do a lot of those things where the day-to-day things you learn as a software developer, I had to learn outside my studies and outside of school. So I mean, what do you think? Do you think that is considered to be self-taught?
I mean, I think so. Like, I think most developers, regardless of their path, will say that they are self-taught, because the reality of the situation is you have to be. You have to be successful, because technology changes so quickly, and colleges typically go a little bit slower, and they focus on more of the principles behind certain things and not necessarily the practical elements. And so I think at the end of the day that a self-taught developer is pretty much every developer. But generally, when you're talking about it, you're talking about, or when most people are thinking about self-taught developer, they're thinking about how you got your start, how you got your foot in the door, and the path that entailed.
Yeah, for sure. That's what I also agree. It's just that path. But in some ways, we've kind of had that CS. We've kind of framed self-taught as almost against traditional education in some instances. When a lot of people describe themselves self-taught, they are really telling themselves, well, I was self-taught because I didn't go to school, or I didn't go to a boot camp. And I think that's kind of the frame I hear a lot of people talking about self-taught developers, but like you said, it's not always true.
Yeah, and you could take me as an example. I by and large, people consider me self-taught, and myself included. But you have to remember, I spent 3 years in a dedicated CS program. I may have dropped out. I don't have a degree, but I've done the multiple calculus courses, the physics, the discrete mathematics, the various Java courses, the web development courses. I've done those sorts of things. But I'm still considered self-taught because I didn't really use any of that. And I instead, went and I used online free resources to teach myself.
So do you think, I mean, even with boot camps, even if coming out of boot camp, there's going to be tons of things you're going to learn outside of the boot camp. And same thing if you get like a nano degree or some other non-typical academic degree, you are still not learning everything you need to do. So there is a lifelong amount of learning, like you'd said. I don't know, maybe self-directed is a better word.
I think the major issue with this is that a lot of people like to see things as black and white, of like, this is this is that. And a lot of times the reality of the way the world works, and in this case, is things are in shades of gray, where these things there's always going to be overlap, and there's always going to be some things that are similar, some things that are different. But self-directed is very accurate, because self-taught route, as we're sort of referring to it, is I am my own student. I am my own lesson planner, and I need to go find a teacher in a sense. And who is the best teacher for me is up to you, and what you're learning is up to you as well.
I like that idea of shades of gray. Like it's almost all of us. We're not completely self-taught. We're not completely not self-taught. There's shades of gray in between. So I really like that. Let's move when we talk about like who's out there. What do we see today? How many people are technically self-taught, maybe more self-directed, that didn't go through traditional education versus people that did? So I looked up some statistics and I found Stack Overflow every year. They're obviously a big site that if you're a programmer or developer, you've probably used it quite a few times to ask questions, have lots of questions and answers on there.
Or
They
get your questions denied. I don't know. I think I've had 2 email accounts banned for asking stupid questions to Stack Overflow. I was just trying to learn.
It is a little elite. I have heard of many people trying to participate in the Stack Overflow world by either creating questions or answering questions, and either finding their questions being downvoted, or questions being not answered at all, or they're trying to help other people. And I would say that your mileage may vary, but regardless of that, they do a survey every year, and they interview just developers. So these are back-end developers, front-end developers, PHP, Java, JavaScript, all sorts. And they just asked them like they got some demographic information. So they were trying to figure out, and this was like 85,000 developers in 2019. So they found, they asked levels of education to see like, what do developers have nowadays and worldwide. So I think that I think it's pretty similar to just United States too, but they saw nearly 3/4 of all developers who had taken the survey had equivalent to a bachelor's degree or higher, which it broke down to like 45.3% people had bachelor's degrees, 22.7% had masters, 1.4% professional degrees, and 2.8% doctorates. So almost 3/4 had some sort of bachelor's degree or equivalent or higher. And then about a quarter, about 25%, had some college education without earning a degree or less. So it still feels like in the industry we're in, maybe Dylan, do you agree that it's still dominated by people with a bachelor's degree, not necessarily computer science, but a bachelor's degree of some kind?
Yeah. I mean, the stats support that. I would say that I mean, I know a lot of the people that I've worked with, and this is anecdotal evidence, but the majority of the people I've worked with do not have STEM degrees. They have degrees in uselessness, things like art, things like music and English. And I'm not saying that you are useless, but those are useless degrees in corporate America for the most part. And they go back and they say, hey, I can't pay my 50 grand of student loans off, or there's no one wants to hire me. And so you make 2 choices at this point. You double down and you get a master's in uselessness, which happens a lot. Then you go get an undergrad debt, or you say, you know what, I want a and I'm joking, but this is somewhat true. You go and you go and say, hey, what will get me a job and get me a good salary? And you end up either going to a boot camp, or you end up going the self-taught route and sort of trying to get some more marketable skills.
They did say that 60% of those people that had the bachelor's degree or higher or equivalent were in computer science, and then 8.2% were in other engineering, and then probably the rest are probably in some of those useless type degrees that don't have quite as much job mobility and job growth as what we see in the computer and technology world today. Developers are lifelong learners. I like this quote from the survey. It said, developers are lifelong learners. Almost 90% of all developers say they have taught themselves in new languages, frameworks, or tools outside their formal education. Among professional developers, about 60% say they took online courses like MOOCs, up significantly from last year, and about a quarter have participated in a hackathon. So that's like the MOOC is like that massive online education courses that you can take that some universities offer up for free. So to Dylan's point earlier, I think we all consider ourselves somewhat self-taught in some ways.
Yeah, and I think this is an important stat to note as well, of like, if you're in that 10% of people who are not learning something outside of work, you have to understand that 9 out of 10 of people in your field are, and you're probably going to be at the bottom of your field because of that. And that's a scary thing, because as we see more and more careers sort of get deprecated really at the end of the day, and tech is moving very fast and software is moving very fast, is the last thing you want to do is eliminate some of the reasons you decided to go into software, which was good job growth, good salaries, good career options. And by not staying up to date, it's a scary thing to be in. So don't be in that 10%.
Yes. And definitely I've worked at jobs where it feels like everybody around me was in that 10%. No offense to those people, but some people just consider it as a job. You leave at the end of the day and they don't want to learn more.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay, but there is consequences for not doing that.
Yeah. And I think that's more, this is sort of a sad truth, but I think that's more of a company culture thing than a developer thing. There's definitely certain developers who have just lost faith. But my personal opinion, having worked at one of these death march companies, is that a lot of times, most successful developers enjoy what they do, and a company can kill that for you when they're working you 60-hour weeks and you have an awful environment. So that's how I know it's time for me to job hop, is when I'm like, oh, you know what? I don't enjoy going and working on side projects anymore because apparently I'm miserable. But that's just
like all the life is drained out of you. You're just slumping on your way home, just having just enough energy to order some food from Postmates or Uber Eats and sit in front of the boob tube. And that's your life energy. Yeah. Don't let that happen. Another survey I found is Utah JS. They had a survey. It was much smaller. I think it was only like a few hundred developers. But one interesting fact I found from that survey was that experience has a larger determining factor on pay than education. And I try to find larger stats on this about pay and correlating it to education. And I couldn't find too many surveys. I couldn't find any except this one mentioning it. But I think I would say this is generally true. So even though you may not have a formal education, you may be more coming from the self-taught, didn't go to traditional school route, you could still earn quite a bit of money.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sort of anecdotal evidence to support this. I've made larger monies than most of my colleagues with masters in computer science, and part of that is negotiating. Part of that is being able to have the skills to pay the bills, as the kids say. But part of that is just being able to actually do the job. And I think when you're in a very technical field like ours, where this is one of the things that, because generally speaking, I don't think this is the trend outside of our industry for the most part. I think generally speaking, the higher part of the reason you go to college is to make more money and do all this sort of stuff, and the stats would support that. But in our industry, it is something that you can actually be tested on very rigorously through technical exams and things like that, and whiteboards, that you can prove that you have the skills on actually prove in person. And so that experience and those skills can actually be weighted and on a scale of 1 to 10 even at the end of the day.
I think some people would debate you on whether whiteboarding is a good way to determine someone's skills, but I agree with the rest.
Yeah, no, I don't like the algorithm stuff either, but generally speaking, you can sort of test developers.
No, I'm not anti whiteboarding, but I can see sort of both sides. I can understand why some people are frustrated that a lot of companies do these type of whiteboarding interviews that are very technical and almost you have to study a ton for them, versus someone who's been in the industry for 10 years. You give them a project, they're going to do really, really well. They can create anything you want in a few days, hours, perhaps. But if you put them in front of a whiteboarding interview and ask them to create a linked list from scratch, they'll fail. That's a different conversation for a different time, though. So let's go to the negative first, and then we'll go to the positive. And I think there's definitely, these are reasons why you may not want to be getting into to be self-taught, or some maybe more negatives, I should say. And this can discourage some people, may not. So one of the maybe negatives you could say was, if you are trying to be self-taught, and usually you have to build your own curriculum. So we can agree, though there is shades of self-taught in everyone, when they're in development programming. But self-taught, usually you don't have an actual instructor that is teaching you something. It is a lot more self-directed. You are learning the material yourself. So therefore, you kind of have to build your own curriculum. There's no hand-holding. There's no professor teaching you. There's usually no one looking over your shoulder. You have to put together all the resources yourself, and there's no accountability, especially when you're trying this self-directed learning approach.
Yeah, in my opinion, if we're sort of saying between CS and self-taught and boot camp and all the other, I think the self-taught route for the majority of people is definitely going to be the hardest, because it's going to be the most unfamiliar, and it's going to be the accountability is something a lot of people struggle with. I have to set my own milestones. I have to set my own objective. I have to set how I'm going to achieve those objectives, and no one's checking up on me. If I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail because of me. If I'm going to succeed, I'm going to succeed because of me. It's definitely one of the harder paths to go. But to overcome that, the building of your own curriculum, the thing that I did and that I recommend is defining what your goals are. And if you're not sure, if your goal is to get a junior level front end job in Salt Lake City, say for instance, go and look on LinkedIn what those junior level front end jobs are requiring. Look through a couple hundred, make a list of the skills you need, and then go learn them. And that will be your curriculum. So that's what I did, and I thought it was one of the better ways of going about it.
That's a good tip. The other problem that you'll run into when you're doing self-taught learning and self-directed teaching is when you get to that place where you finally want to go for that interview, you're going to have the first, I like to call it the first interview problem. But it's essentially, it's a chicken and egg thing where most places want you to have experience. So they won't hire you, but you can only get experience if you get hired somewhere. So you have this kind of first interview problem where HR and a lot of other people won't even give you the chance to interview with them. And that can be could feel like a very insurmountable problem when you finally feel like you've learned enough and you're starting to apply for places. And I know one way, I'm going to steal Dylan's thunder here for a minute. One way you can get over this problem is just to apply for lots and lots of places. Would you say that's one way?
I mean, I think that's generally speaking, even if you have your first junior level job, it's a good place going about it. But I think more so the way of going about it, and that's something you're going to have to do, is you have to tailor your resume to the positions where no one gives a shit that you worked at Albertsons or Publix or something like that. What they do care about is that you have projects that you can show that, the thing I always say is you need to show that you are already a developer who just doesn't have resume experience, and you can do that in a variety of ways, whether you're going to getting certificates, whether you've built 20 projects and you have links and you have the skills and technologies clearly organized and listed on the top of your resume, broken down, that recruiters are looking for. And it's understandable why. Like, I had a subscriber today come to my live stream and said, hey, I got my first internship that's contract to hire. It's $40 an hour. This guy's going from making $8 an hour, being like a bagger, to making 40. And like, that's a huge jump for a lot of people, and it's respectable. So yeah, it's going to be hard, but it's going to be worth it. But you have to prove you are already a developer without any experience, and there's various ways of going about that.
When you go and look for pay, so let's say you were able to show your experience, I think another problem is if you come out of a boot camp or you come out of very hard on your interviewing skills, how to interview with employers, how to apply for jobs that are going to pay you more money. They really work on a lot of those skills that you don't get if you're self-taught. And what tends to happen, and I looked at some survey results from the Utah JS, and it seems to correlate with this. Your first job, if you don't have any education, no experience, seems to pay less. And when I'm talking about less is maybe you come out of a traditional college and you can get non-Bay Area, keep that in mind, non-tech hub area, keep that in mind.
No tech lead salaries.
No. You might get like $55,000, maybe $65,000 a year coming out of a good university and applying for the right places in your city. However, if you are someone that just needs to get their foot in the door somewhere, you're going to get some pretty bad offers most of the time. You're going to get people that want you to do hourly work for $10 an hour. You might get a really low paid internship or not paid internship at all. I remember I've heard this other YouTuber, I'm not going to call him out, but he said his first job, and he was a self-taught developer, paid him $35,000, $34,000 a year. But like he just had to get in the door somewhere. So you end up taking kind of crappy salaries if you end up finally getting that first job.
Yeah, and so a lot of this some of this can be avoided, right? The very first job, you just got to take what you can get to get that resume experience at the end of the day. And if you're getting paid and you got web developer, front end developer, whatever it is, great, take it. And after about 3 months of learning the technologies they're using, it's time you can jump jobs as soon as you want. And so you can go for that pay increase. I recently mentored somebody who 5 months after graduating high school, he had spent about a year making about 30K a year and then jumped to 65 after 1 year, which is, huge, right? And you're going from that sort of jump. So a couple things that I just want to touch on is about unpaid internships. My personal opinion, based off the stats, that I did a video about this in the past, is not to do them. I'm going to get the stats somewhat in the ballpark what it said, but statistically speaking, when an unpaid internship turns to a hired role, you're going to get paid less, and you're less likely to get hired by like 2/3 in a paid internship. I think your time's better spent working on projects that are relevant to you rather than relevant to somebody else. And moving forward, secondly, if you're learning the lower end stuff, you're obviously going to probably get paid less. I didn't in my case. I did very well for my very first real job, but my first internship I made $12 an hour. So but learn skills that are current, because those are going to be the ones that pay more, and those are going to be the ones that are going to have the biggest skill gap for the market.
I wonder too if internships, how many businesses are willing to hire an intern that isn't a student, because I think that's sometimes a requirement for some places. Like you're never going to get an internship at Google unless you're a student somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, good. I wouldn't necessarily, let's talk about like the outliers, like the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons, the Microsofts, right? And more so talk about the other 95%. And I know that any place that I've worked at that has had internships, which isn't that many, in fairness, because a lot of places they don't want junior devs, they don't want interns. So it's a lot of most of them are students, or most of them are recent college grads they're looking to hey, give them a shot and then hire them after 3 months. But that is true that certain organizations, they do interns specifically just for the summer or something like that, where maybe business is slower and they're looking to maybe only keep one of the three.
Yeah, so your mileage may vary. That's true. I want to touch on this one topic too, before we go into reasons why you should take the self-taught route, and some more of the positive things about it is the psychology behind being self-taught and what that means for yourself. And I am not a psychologist. I did take some classes in college about it, and so I will try to explain these concepts as best as I can. But, when you're trying the self-taught route, or especially if you are coming from not knowing anything about development, you have to have motivation, like that burning motivation of being able to do something for nothing. Basically, you're not going to get paid. It's not really clear if you will get a job. You might spend 6 months, a year working on something. You could spend 2 weeks working on it and quit, and it'll be all for naught. I think self-esteem is a part of it too, like how you value yourself, and how, if you have low self-esteem, I don't think that is a good starting point for someone who's going to get into the self-taught path. And then openness to experience. So doing things you've never done before, to walking a path where it's not really clear where it's going to go. And a certain amount of openness is, I think, crucial to someone that's going down this path.
Yeah, and I somewhat, I don't know, say disagree with something you said here about not knowing that you're going to get a job or so. I think that's the wrong mindset to have. So when I dropped out of college, I'm studying nonstop. It wasn't that I didn't know I was going to get a job. I knew I was going to get a job. I just didn't know when. And nothing in life is guaranteed. And so a lot of times people are very risk averse, which is one reason a lot of people are sort of scared of boot camps and going the self-taught route. So if you are going this route, you need to have the mindset that, there is going to be moments of doubt, without a doubt. But generally speaking, 99% of the time, you need to have the mindset that I'm getting a job. I don't know if it's tomorrow. I don't know if it's next year, but I'm doing everything every day to get to that point, and it will happen. I just don't know when.
So if you kind of think of yourself and have a lot of self-doubt before you start this journey, then that's going to be a problem from the start. That's a good point.
Yeah,
The reality is that there's no guarantee.
Yeah,
but
much like with going to college, right? There's no guarantee that you're going to go and become a great dev or get a job, or like, I with Engineers Truth Channel, he gets people who hate on him about certain degrees that he says are bad, but the stats support like, hey, this is going to be a harder route to take. No one said the self-taught route's going to be easy, and it's not. None of this is easy. But if you think that you're going to put 2 weeks, 3 weeks, or listen to one of these idiot YouTubers who tell you can be a dev in 2 months, then someone's lied to you and they're setting unrealistic expectations. But if you're willing to grind daily, code every day until you get a job, then all you got to do is code every day until you get a job. Like, that's the thing. You just have to put the time, effort in and have the mentality that I'm going to succeed as a developer. When? I don't know. Am I going to make a lot of money right when I start? I don't know. But eventually I'll be doing very well for myself. And you have to understand that, yeah, you're not getting paid this exact moment, but you will be making significant dividends down the road where you're going to go double your salary, triple your salary. And there's very few industries that you can do that in.
Well said. Couple other psychology things that I think are worth mentioning is mindset. There's a kind of famous book I've seen it talked about in a ton of different podcasts. I don't know if you heard of this book called Mindset by Carolyn Dweck.
No, I'm not deep enough to read books like that.
It's kind of gone around the pop culture, I don't know, internet for a little bit, but it's starting to, I've been hearing it lately. But basically the idea is that Carolyn Dweck is this professor that studied groups of kids in, small as grade school, and they were looking at how they learn. And she found out that through tests and studying that certain kids who had a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset did worse. So fixed mindset were kids that somehow thought that their intelligence was fixed. So they are maybe they weren't good at math, so they said, well, I can never be good at math. That's just who I am. I'm not a math person. Or they might think they're super intelligent and like, okay, I'm just super intelligent. I'm really good at math. This is as good as, I'm going to be really good at math. But they weren't willing to put the effort in to get better. And what they found out is for the students that said they had this fixed mindset and they thought they were really bad at something, well, they were really bad at it, and they never put effort into it because they thought they could never get better. And even the students that were really good at something, that had this fixed mindset, they would never put in the extra effort. So they would maybe get A's on the assignments that they were given, but they would never put the extra effort in. And then as time went on and assignments got harder, and usually there's a big jump between high school and college, some of these people who never studied, everything came easy to them. When college came around, they really struggled because it became a lot more difficult, and they thought, well, they just didn't have the right mindset. And the students that had the growth mindset were the ones that, and by the way, I'm simplifying this, so if you read the book, this is a simplification of it. The people with the growth mindset thought, it's all about the effort that they put in to get better. They didn't think that their intelligence was some fixed point that you can never change, that it's all about the time and effort you put in. And I think this really goes to the point of self-taught, that if you're a self-taught developer, you have to have really that growth mindset, that you can learn, that you can get better, that if you look at the Big Bang Theory and you see these amazing, these fictional characters that are just geniuses and they just were born that way, like Sheldon Cooper. Is anybody a Big Bang Theory fan? No.
Just being you, so no.
Anyways, but the idea is that no, we can work hard, we can put the effort in, and you can just be as smart as the best developer out there if you put the time and effort in.
Yeah, and sort of to that mindset thing, one thing I'm always very careful of doing is not putting myself in categories or groups and saying this is the type of person I am, this is who I am, because it becomes very hard to feel like you're like you want to belong and then you don't want to break out, and it makes it harder in life and in dev and everything to really think logically through things about if something's right for you if you already have a predetermined like this is who I am and this is who I always going to be. So maybe in that same sort of same sort of vein, think about that of maybe not necessarily whether it's your beliefs, whether it's your goals, whether you think you're good or bad at something, not to really put yourself into a box and really evaluate every situation uniquely.
I like that. I like not putting labels on people because I think we're all more complicated than that.
Yeah, and generally speaking, about 90% of us have the same intelligence. There's about 5% of people are idiots no matter what they do, and about 5% of people who are geniuses. So for like, if you're not in those 5%, you're probably on the same level, and then it comes down to effort, execution, and sort of working smart and hard.
Yeah, I would say there's some gifted and talented people out there that are naturally gifted in certain things, but I think if you put enough effort in, you can get close to that level in a lot of these people. One other thing to finish off the psychology rant here is something called self-efficacy, which I learned in my behavioral class in college, but it's basically how well one can execute courses of action required to deal with prospective situations. So if you have low self-efficacy, it could lead people to believe tasks to be harder than they actually are. And this often results in like poor task planning as well as increased stress. While people with high self-efficacy tend to take a wider view of tasks in order to determine the best plan. So obstacles often stimulate people with high self-efficacy to greater efforts, or someone with low self-efficacy will tend toward discouragement and give up. So it's kind of how you look at a situation. This isn't a personality trait. This is more of how you take on certain situations. And it's really a behavior of a person that you can change. So if you are one of those people that you get easily discouraged and you think the tasks are too hard, and that's your mindset going in, self-taught's probably not the right route for you. But if you're one of those people that can be like, wow, I'm going to put greater effort in. These obstacles are just speed bumps on my way to my eventual destination, and you're willing to do a lot of action and effort to fix it, then that would be kind of the mindset you want to go in to be a self-taught developer.
Yeah, it's going to be hard. If you think it's going to be easy and you're just going to, you're the type to give up, I'll save you some time. Give up now. And if me telling you to give up is going to make you give up, you weren't going to make it. All right. So just be prepared that there are going to be obstacles and you're going to have to figure out how to overcome them. And one thing I would say is don't get stuck on an obstacle. When you have a blocker and you're stuck on you're like, I got to learn algorithms, and you're getting stuck, you may not be ready. Move on to building a project. You're like so sick of doing projects, can't do that. Go and watch a video series. Can't watch any more video series? Go to a meetup. The goal is to continually move forward. And so when you get blocked, it's okay to take a breather and just figure out another way to get better and then circle back to take on this task.
I did that in college. I got blocked on algorithms. I remember trying to learn linked lists for the first time, and I was so confused and I was like frustrated and I didn't know what to do. And then I just talked to a friend and I said, hey, can you sit down and explain this to me? And he spent like an hour just going over it, and it just made so much more sense. Let's go and talk about reasons why you should take the self-taught. Well, before we do that, I just want to say one more thing. A good indication if you want to be a self-taught developer or not is look at your past behavior. And what I mean by that is, how did you behave in school? How did you behave in your early adulthood? How do you take on challenges? Try to actually look at the behavior you did and not just like try to introspectively think about it, because I think that's difficult to do. Look at what you actually did or did not do. So like if you are a person that, like for example, if you're into cars and your car breaks down and you're really into like trying to figure out how to fix it, and you spent weeks on fixing something in your household, or you'd love to deep dive into concepts before you were ever taught them, maybe that's a good indication you would be really good at being a self-taught developer. I don't know, Dylan, were there indications in your past that made you think that you would be good at being a self-taught developer rather than going to traditional education?
You know,
Were you the kid in school that spent hours reading a topic because you thought it was super interesting before the teacher even taught it?
no, that definitely wasn't me. I was, I was the kid that was watching cartoons after school and would knock out his homework in about an hour for the week if in elementary school, and like knock everything. I could always knock something. I could knock out a week's worth of work in a day, and just then I would play nothing but like Super Nintendo or Nintendo 64 or PlayStation, depending on the year. But I will say that it may be something that's not readily apparent. You know, knowing what I know now, I would never have gone to college because it's not how, having experienced it, it's not how I succeed, how I learn. I succeed by doing things my own way. I have a clear objective in mind, and I'm able to, from the internet's a powerful thing, from the resources on the internet, which is infinite, able to figure out how to get there in my own way and keep it fun and enjoyable. And I would say for me that I didn't realize that until I tried pretty much everything else, to say like, hey, this is not working for me, maybe this other thing will. And that was what sort of made me decide to go the self-taught route.
All right, let's keep going. So, reasons why you should take the self-taught route. Obviously, one of the biggest ones is it's usually cheaper. So, usually this is the cheapest route of everything between going and get a traditional education. Usually, courses and books are a lot cheaper than buying really expensive classes or going to a boot camp that will eventually charge you $15,000 either right away or within 2 years after you get paid and get a job.
Yeah, and I've said a couple times that when I did decide that I was going the self-taught route, I didn't spend a dollar, like not a single dollar on a course, nothing. I did all free resources, and I'm not saying it's the best plan. I do recommend that you go and buy some courses on Udemy, but honestly, I don't see any reason anyone who's being self-taught can't go from spending 0 to maybe 500 at max on courses. Like you get 25 courses, you spend $500 and and even more, and sort of train your and skill up. And because it's free to build your own projects. GitHub's free, guys. Go ahead and just start working.
I will say though, if you do buy a bunch of cheap courses, you kind of get what you paid for. A lot of times, sometimes you'll get lucky and get a course that's 40 hours long, but even then there's going to be probably some downsides to it. Like you don't really get as much hand holding. So you do get cheaper stuff when you're doing that. You can find, if you just Google around for blog articles, or look at official documentation. I mean, sometimes they're just as good as some traditional education stuff, but I don't know. I think it varies a lot.
So we've talked a little bit about hand holding, and one thing that I would say is that no matter what route you're going, the hand holding should always be a minimum. And so these courses are, without a doubt, if you take a course, you're only going to be passively learning and you're not going to retain all that. The way that you're going to be successful with these courses is going and doing these courses and using them as so much more of an overview, and then going and building something and taking the action, no hand, removing that hand, because once you are able to do it on your own, that's going to be how you retain it. That's going to be how you learn. And so regardless of the route you're going, you want to try and keep the hand holding to a minimum.
Keep the hand holding to your significant other.
And no footsie either.
So more flexibility. So you have more flexibility in your learning. You can learn quick or fast as you want. You can determine what you want to learn. I like the idea of skipping things that I don't think are important. To Dylan's point earlier about looking at what tech jobs are in your area and what people are hiring for and what skills. If you see everybody's hiring for React, sadly, probably don't need to learn Vue right away. Yeah. I like Vue, but probably don't need to learn it right away. And there's a lot of amazing success stories, which are really motivating. We kind of joke around that there's a lot of self-taught developers on YouTube that are saying, giving advice of how to become a developer in 2 or 3 months. But there's also a lot of inspirational stories, just like Dylan's. If you haven't listened to Dylan's episode where he talks about how he went from living in a small apartment, doing YouTube videos with a microwave behind him, to now making a 6-figure job, I mean, you got to watch that. You got to listen to that. It's a pretty amazing story. So there's a lot of successful stories that kind of help people motivate them along.
Yeah, and so one thing about motivation, and this is sort of off topic, but don't need external motivation to get you to where you need to go, because external motivation is very temporary. What you have to find is something internally to motivate you. And so for me, I had to hit sort of my rock bottom of how I was going to go and make sure that, because the whole flexibility in your learning, I would say that flexibility should be it should start on day one and end at day zero. Like, it's literally like one of those items where you need to set times, and every free minute in your self-taught path is dedicated to this. Otherwise, all of a sudden you're going out at nights and you're not doing this, you're not doing that. And you could fall into that trap of where you wanted to get a job in a year, and now you're 2 years later and you really haven't improved all that much.
How did you get past like the roadblocks right at the beginning and being able to put all that time in? And
Yeah, it was hard. It was and I sometimes I joke that I don't know if I could do it again. And then I was talking with my brother about this, and he's like, I bet if you're making $15 an hour in Southern California, you could figure it out again. I was like, probably. But the truth of the matter is I just dedicated every minute I had, every single minute. And when I got stuck on something, I'd move on to something else. And I got stuck on something, move on to something else. And it was frustrating. I remember crying at my keyboard because I didn't understand APIs, like really didn't understand APIs. I had limited resources. So going to meetups was great, and sort of finding some support, being able to build that like a gym buddy, like, oh, hey, how are you doing? You doing this? And we work on projects together. That was really good because it made me feel not as alone in sort of this journey. And one of the reasons I decided to drop out when I did was I took a job at a software company where now I had access to devs. Now I got to ping questions often. So in the API example where I'm crying over the weekend, I spent like 20 hours trying to understand APIs, and I'd been grinding. I just still off by a bit. And I asked him a question, and he explained it literally in like a minute, and then everything made sense for that. So being able to have access to resources, and whether they're online, in person, whatever you can get your hands on, take advantage of it.
so this podcast is going a little long, but I'm just gonna hit some more things, just how to begin this journey. I think in a future episode we could probably deep dive into this a lot more. And if you are interested in learning more, check out Dylan's YouTube channel. Check out my YouTube channel. We have tons of videos on these things. So I'd say like this is generally how I would start. Is we talked about this a little earlier, having goals, having what they're called SMART goals that are measurable. So you can start understanding the motivation behind why you have things, and then how you're going to attain them. And there's ways of making good goals and bad goals. Try to understand the process. Maybe you put your goals based on, like, instead of like your goal is I'm going to get a job, your goal is I'm going to put in 10 resumes a week. So that would probably be a better goal than get a job, because that's really ambiguous and not clear in exactly how do you do that or what steps you take.
Yeah, and to that point, one thing I would definitely suggest is a lot of people wait way too long to apply. They're very nervous. Imposter syndrome is rampant in this industry, and even more so with self-taught dev. So even if you feel like you're not quite there yet, start applying, start getting those interviews, start seeing what people are saying you're lacking, seeing where, no one likes to bomb an interview, but it gives you a good scale of where you're at.
I've been a developer for 10 plus years, and I still hate getting rejection letters. Either applying for jobs, getting a rejection letter, or even just doing stuff on YouTube, and I'm trying to contact somebody and they're like, nope, I don't want to, nope, we're not going to be able to collab. I'm like, that still makes me upset, but you got to learn how to do that. I want to say there was a really good, I was reading this blog post by the guy from Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe. Do you know who I'm talking about, Dylan?
No, I don't.
He was talking, he's like this actor that starred in this, I think it was a TLC channel TV show called Dirty Jobs, and he goes and he does jobs when no one else wants to do. But he was talking about his journey and how in Hollywood he had to go to these open call auditions, and he would go on, and between like 1980 and 1999, he went on like 10,000 auditions and then got 50 jobs out of it, like less than 1%. And so every day he had to deal with rejection. And he was telling about, unless you're not human, that's going to affect you. But the only power rejection has is the power you give it. So if you give rejection a crazy amount of power and it hurts you and it stops you from doing things, then that's the power it's done to you. But it doesn't have any intrinsic power by itself. I like that.
And it's a mentality thing, really, right? And you should be there should be some expectation that some companies are just going to ignore you because you don't have a degree. That's something that happens. A little less so nowadays, but does happen. And there's going to be, you're going to fill out hundreds of apps to get that first job. The hardest thing you're going to do, you thought it might have been APIs, you thought it might have been algorithms. No, the hardest thing you're going to have to do is get that first job. And you're going to need to be able to handle that rejection. You're going to need to persevere. But the good thing is you only need one. You can apply as many times as you want, but you're only going to need one of them to say yes.
It's just like dating. You can just hit on hundreds of girls. You just need one to say yes.
Politely. Yeah. Man. So spamming people on Facebook. You want to go on a date? Please.
Don't do that. If you're listening, don't do that. Okay, I think we've talked this to death. There's a ton of other little things, like we talked about finding a community, building a solid foundation, embracing that cycle of learning, taking advantage of some free resources, finding a niche. We had mentioned like making sure you have a niche. We're gonna say something, Dylan?
I was gonna say this is a little harder than not, but if you can get a mentor, someone that you're gonna have to put all the energy in but someone, when you say run this direction, you're gonna run that way. And you could sometimes find those people at meetups. Sometimes you can. In my case, I took the job at the software company before I was a dev and got some mentoring that way. Sometimes from these YouTube channels, find someone to help provide you with some direction. And it's don't show up to meetups and be like, will you be my mentor? That's not really how this is going to work. But find somebody to provide you direction, and it'll oftentimes help you work smart at the end of the day.
And Dylan has his own mentorship program. Always be closing ABC.
Yeah. It's gotta make that money. But yeah, I do some mentoring. You can shoot me an email and we'll set it up.
Yeah, I know Dylan does mention, in all seriousness, Dylan does help several students out right now. But I mean, join our Cotech and Caffeine, talking about plugs, Cotech and Caffeine. If you go to our website, it's over 10,000 people. That might be a good place to start, just to get a community too. Not necessarily mentorship, but a community.
We should make an episode where like people will think we're joking. We'll say nothing but plugs will be there. And then it'll just be 30 minutes of us plugging every project that we've ever made ever and try to get people to go, just a bunch of links and everything.
Yeah, exactly. And speaking of plugs, we are looking for sponsors for season 2. Actually, this will be the last episode of the season. And so if we're going to be taking a few weeks off, and we'll be coming back in January with our season 2. So, if you know of any sponsors, let us know, and definitely, contact us if you're interested.
Yeah, because season 2 is going to be fire. All right. I promise you. We're going hard in season 2.
Yeah. We did seasons 2 because we thought it would be just easier to like take little breaks once we got a certain amount of episodes recorded, and it's the holidays and a lot of people are busy. So I thought this is a perfect time to take it.
Yeah. I got to go to a lot of church events. That's it.
Dylan, he's Pastor Dylan.
Church of money. All right. All right. Shall we leave it on that?
Yep.
All right. Work hard, guys, and do your best.
Until next season. See ya.
Yeah. Bye. Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you want to find more about what I'm up to, go to dylanisrael.com.
And if you want to know what I'm up to, you can check out my website, eric.video. If you haven't already, please leave us a 5-star review on iTunes. It really helps us out. And if you do, you might even be featured on our next episode. Don't forget to check out the website at selftaughteornot.com. From there, you can sign up for a mailing list where we give away free courses and a bunch of cool stuff. And we'll also let you know when the next episode comes out. And finally, if you didn't know, we have a Facebook group. It's called Code, Tech, and Caffeine. We have over 10,000 members, and you can find the link at selftaughtornot.com. So come join us. We have tons of developers willing to help you guys, mentor you guys. Check it out. Just make sure you go to selftaughtornot.com and check out the Code, Tech, and Caffeine link. Thanks, and take care.